Community losses didn't like it because it would have meant that they had to concentrate on their members' needs rather than their own personal ideology and desire.
I think the guy who's pretty straightforward is Dan Dwyer 2012. We're going to have Representative Ken Hawkins in Ovigamonte following the debate. And as the room fills, you're going to hear some background noise. We are broadcasting live from the center of New Hampshire, Radisson. The debate between Ovigamonte and Kevin Smith, the contenders for the GOP nomination for governor, is being sponsored by Representative John Burt, who hosts a show called New Hampshire Politics with John Burt on Goffstown Television. He's a state representative representing the towns of Goffstown and Ware, and he operates the Granite State Institute of Politics here in the Manchester area. Certainly before the debate starts, we're going to share with you what the format's going to be, because that's part of what we've got going on.
For this opportunity to come together tonight. And we're so fortunate to live in New Hampshire, to live free or die state. And we're so thankful for this opportunity tonight for our candidates, two very good men, Ovid LaMontagne and Kevin Smith. And what we really believe tonight is that after our family and our spiritual life, that the most important thing we ever do is public service. And we have so many wonderful opportunities here in the state of New Hampshire to serve our state and serve our country. And we pray that you would be with the candidates tonight, be with the moderators, and we thank you for John Burt and all the effort that he has gone to make this event possible tonight, for all the sponsors and for every person that's here. For what we know is that every person matters, and every person is important, and every person has a part to play in making our state and our country the great country of the United States of America. We pray this prayer in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Cliff. Would you mind giving the pledge?
Oh, not at all. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Bryce. Well, I'd like just a brief moment, or a minute. I'm going to introduce one of the moderators, and I'd like to have him speak just for a minute and tell us what his thoughts are. And I don't want to, through his leadership, this state really has improved a lot. You know, we've cut the budget. We almost had right to work. It was really close. I think we're going to get it next year. And I'm very happy that he accepted my offer to be a moderator here, and I'd like to introduce Speaker William O'Brien.
Thank you so much, and thank you, John. It's really a pleasure to be here with you and Alex and this great assembly of Republicans, as well as two of the finest public servants that New Hampshire has to offer. We are so fortunate as a party and as a state that these two men have offered themselves as governor. Now, this term, we've had some great reforms in New Hampshire. We balanced the budget with no new taxes, no new fees, honest revenue estimates, and closed an almost $900 million deficit as we did it. We've passed over 80 bills that eliminate and reduce regulations on businesses and individuals. We've passed a voter ID law after years. ballot this November a constitutional amendment that will give all of you the opportunity to say, we won't ever have an income tax in New Hampshire. We've promoted strong families in so many ways. One of the most significant is that proudly we have a parental notification bill that will tell parents if their young daughters are going to be undergoing an abortion. We've reduced or eliminated over 20 taxes, even as we were able to balance the budget. And all of these efforts have resulted in unemployment in New Hampshire falling almost 20% as our workforce is growing. But much needs to be done. We came in and reacted to a crisis budget that had been given to us by the Democrat Party. And now we need to restructure government. We need a smaller, more responsive, more efficient government, a more respectful government. We need to continue free market reforms by passing a right-to-work bill to give job freedom back to the workers in New Hampshire. The gains are substantial, but they're fragile. They need to be firmed up. They need to be extended. And so I, along with you, am so anxious to hear from these two fine men on how they're going to use their skills and their understanding of the issues and their leadership to help us have a stronger state. So thank you very much for having me.
And our next moderator is Alex Talcott, newly of Durham. He is the Communication Director of 4RG, a political action committee for a Republican governor, working to elect the next Republican governor of New Hampshire in 2012. He's an attorney by trade. He also sells real estate on the seacoast and is an adjunct instructor at Newberry College. Would everybody please welcome Alex Talcott.
Like Speaker O'Brien, I'm not here to be a politically neutral moderator. It's just conservative-ator isn't a word. I'll be with one of you in November. Unlike the Speaker, I don't plan to present either of you with specific legislation for your signature when one of you is governor. I'm here as someone who has recently chosen New Hampshire among multiple states to again make my home. And on behalf of a political action committee organized specifically to send an executive to head the executive branch of a limited New Hampshire government.
And I did want to mention, I would like to have all the state representatives, senators, and executive councilors just stand up, and I just want to thank them for the hard work that they're doing. In just one quick second. We have just one more special guest that I found out at 3 o'clock today that was going to show up. And I just want to, I don't know where he is, I just want to have him rise if he would. Mr. John Lynch, would you please stand up? He is here.
He's already standing.
There, that's him? Thank you, John. He works for the New Hampshire Public Radio. So I just wanted to thank him for coming and welcome him.
He looks different now.
Yes.
That's what he wanted to do. Does he have a pen?
Well, I'd like to start off with a 2-minute opening. And Kevin, you'll be first.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you to all of you, and Speaker O'Brien, Alex, and John, thank you for putting on this debate this evening, and thank you for everyone for participating and showing up this evening. You know, needless to say, New Hampshire is in desperate need of some new leadership in the corner office in Concord, which is why I've been traveling all around this state for the last 8 months, talking to voters at our various town hall meetings, and speaking to them and sharing with them my long-term vision for the state, my specific economic plan to make New Hampshire more economically competitive over the next decade. And as many of you know, it's a plan that lowers taxes on all businesses. It's a plan that makes healthcare more affordable, brings down our electricity rates, retains more young people in the state after they finish school. And it's a plan to make state government more accountable and transparent to the taxpayers as well. But it's more than just about delivering on big ideas. To me, the next governor has to show that they have the experience and having gotten good reforms in how state government operates. Now, some candidates will talk about offering leaner budgets. I've actually written a reduced budget when I was the assistant director of our state's juvenile justice agency. Some candidates may talk about supporting certain policy reforms like right to work. As an elected official, I voted for right to work back in the 1990s before it was cool to vote for right to work, and I advocated on it very strongly when I was the director of Cornerstone in the last legislative session. And some candidates may even talk about making certain appointments as governor. And as a senior aide to Governor Craig Benson, I was intimately involved in the nomination process for the executive branch, perhaps none more high profile than the nomination of a former Attorney General named Kelly Ayotte, who I'm very proud to call my U.S. Senator today. You know, I've often said that the governor's office, it's a 2-year term. So there's no time for on-the-job training. You got to know what your plan is when you go in there and how you're going to go about executing that plan. You got to be ready to roll on day one. And if I'm your next governor, you can trust that I will be ready on that first day. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, John. It's great to be here.
Thank you, sir. Is there not energy in the Republican Party right now, right here? You know, I want to thank John and the Granite State Institute of Politics for organizing this great event, and for you all to take time out of your lives to come here and talk about policy and have a conversation about the future of New Hampshire. You know, my name is Ovid Lamontagne, and I am running for governor because I know New Hampshire, and I know New Hampshire needs leadership for a change in the corner office in Concord. New Hampshire is at a crossroads as much of the United States, and we need proven, tested, experienced leaders to assume positions of responsibility here in New Hampshire, and I'm ready to do that. I'm a 4th generation New Hampshire native, the son of New Hampshire farmers, mill workers, and dentists. I grew up in blue-collar East Manchester. After college, I taught high school for 3 years with my wife, Betty, and then I went to law school. Worked my way through law school, and then moved back to East Manchester in that same neighborhood where I grew up, next door to my parents. And I started practicing law at Divine Willamette Branch in Manchester. And I've been a business lawyer at the same firm for 26 years. I've represented businesses of all types, small and large, in some of the toughest transactions in New Hampshire. And I've been a business owner. And people across the state tell me, jobs, jobs, jobs is a priority for them. I'm the only candidate for governor in this race who has any business experience whatsoever, and I'll use that experience in representing you in Concord. I've also been a leader in government. I'm the only candidate that's been appointed by our governor, confirmed by executive counselor, to serve you as a volunteer chairman of the State Board of Education in the mid-90s. And we made fundamental changes there. And I've been a leader in the not-for-profit sector as well. It is important that we have government working with charities like Easter Seals, the Boy Scouts, to continue to provide the delivery system for our citizens. I am the only candidate for governor with proven, tested leadership in these 3 sectors of our state government. I am running for governor not to hold office, but to make a difference. And together we can do that for New Hampshire. Thank you very much. Let's have
I'd like to start off with the questions. Alex is going to be the first question, and if you could say who that's going to. Or do you? Go ahead.
Okay, Kevin, we'll send this to you first. Our friend the speaker is called a bully and worse on a daily basis. What names claims are Democratic politicians or others calling you that distort or oversimplify what you're all about, and why are they wrong?
Well, I think that, perhaps the biggest distortion that I think the other side likes to make of conservatives is that we don't necessarily care for the poor and the most vulnerable and the most needy when we talk about making sure that we're running a tight fiscal ship and being responsible as conservatives. And quite frankly, I'm tired of hearing that, because I think we do know that we care for our most poor, our most vulnerable, and our most needy. So that's a big distortion that they put out there. One of the things that I did when I was at Health and Human Services is I recognized that the need was a lot greater than what the state could actually handle and shoulder that burden. So what I did is I worked with Commissioner Stephen at that time, and we came up with the Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives, where we reached out to the private sector and to the nonprofit sector to try to fill in that gap so that we could offer more services to those that were in need through private sector solutions and not always looking to the government to do everything. And I think we frankly need more of that kind of leadership in Concord, and someone that's going to call out the Democrats when they try to make those particular distortions on us.
Yeah, and then Ovid would answer. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So those of you who were not here in the mid-90s, what the Concord Monitor has done to the speaker is nothing compared to what they've done to me. So I've been a beneficiary of some really creative cartooning. In fact, when I was named chairman of the State Board of Education, Mike Marlin, your friend, Mr. Speaker, did a head and shoulder shot of me, dressed like this, except I was wearing glasses. And those glasses had stained glass windows in them. And the caption was, "I'll bring a fresh perspective to the public school system of New Hampshire." And then I was pictured with Governor Merrill standing next to Attorney General Howard in a Moscow outfit, as if we were the Kremlin, overseeing public schools. Do I need to go on? Can I share in the pain that comes with public service when you stand on principle? I was proud to be named the Conservative of the Year by the Americans for Prosperity in 2011, because those of you who know me know that I stand on principle. And that's what New Hampshire needs, principled leadership and tested leadership. And don't tell me conservatives don't have a heart. When you start hearing about how anti-this and anti-that I am. Betty and I have been foster parents of a special needs young man since he was 2 weeks old, and the reason she's not here is she's meeting with him. He's 24 years old right now, living in the community. Conservatives have a heart, and they act from that heart, and we'll stand with them every step of the way. So let's get on this team together, please. Thank you.
Bill, if you could ask the next question to Ovid.
Sure, Ovid, today we learned some disturbing news about the Department of Employment Security and witnessed its commissioners step down over fiscal corruption charges. What will you do to ensure that ethics returns to the executive branch?
Well, thank you, Bill, for that question. Those of you who don't know, Tara Reardon, the commissioner of the Department of Employment Security, was resigned today. It was disclosed that her department hired her daughter and put her on part-time work, perhaps consistent with ethical rules that currently exist. Then she asked, apparently according to the allegations, asked the HR department of the department to fire her so she could get unemployment benefits. This is the same direct commissioner of employment security which awards unemployment benefits. Let me tell you this. We are going to have the highest standard possible in state government if I'm the governor, and I'm going to be proactive. And we're going to meet with commissioners and set the higher standard than we have today. There's no room for this. No room for self-dealing, no room for taking taxpayer dollars to feather your own nest. Now, I hope these allegations are not true, but if they're not true, why would you resign? And we need to make sure that we bring the best and brightest to our state, to work in state government in positions of authority. Because of my relationships with people across the sectors of our state, I will bring the best and brightest, and I'll insist on the highest ethical standards possible. So help me God. Thank you.
We could hold the applause in between. That would get us moving a little bit faster.
Yeah, I would comment on by saying it's absolutely imperative that New Hampshire have the most transparent system possible. And that's why when I talked about my opening remarks, making sure we're running a transparent and accountable government. We have to make sure that we have a robust Board of Ethics on the executive branch level. But at the same time, too, we have to make sure, I would work with my commissioners to make it absolutely imperative that if there's any appearance of conflict of interest, that they have to report that, or that they shouldn't be involved with a hiring decision or a firing decision if it looks like there's going to be certainly an appearance of conflict of interest. Now, in this particular case, I think we have to see, certainly there's been allegations that have been made, but I would want to look at all the facts and make sure they're all out before we jump to any conclusions here, because as we've seen in the past in state government, sometimes there's allegations made and then the rest of the story comes out and we learn out that it wasn't necessarily what it was. And I'm not saying that's the case in this case, but I think it's important to be prudent and not necessarily jump to conclusions. And in my last second, I just want to say, on that last question, the speaker's been called a bully. You know why? Because he inherited a $900 million deficit, and he dared to balance the budget, and I commend him for doing that, Mr. Speaker.
Bill, if you could ask the next question. Well, I'm sorry, Alex, you're the next person. If you could ask Ovid.
Yes, candidates for governor always say they'll be salesmen in chief. Why can't Maggie Hassan or Jackie Silly get on the horn, call up CEOs, and credibly convince them to create jobs in New Hampshire as effectively as you can?
Thank you for that question. When you're on the other end of the phone representing the state of New Hampshire, and your record is that you want to control health care by creating a new PUC, and that's called Maggie Care, and basically having a one-size-fits-all approach from state government, and you're trying to recruit a business to come to New Hampshire, you have no credibility. When you call an executive of a business in another state, and you say, I'm in a state that doesn't have a sales or income tax, yet you haven't taken the pledge, like Jackie Silly, and you supported an income tax in your prior career, earlier in your career. Now you've had an election year conversion, you don't have credibility. When you've supported 84 new tax hikes, a LLC tax on small business, you have no credibility. I have credibility. I've been a business advocate, a business owner. I know business, and I've worked with business in this state. I've consistently campaigned on conservative principles, free market principles. And with the help of people like Steve Forbes' endorsement, we are going to have New Hampshire as the beacon for economic development in this country, and in this region as well. And I'll recruit them directly. I won't be simply a spokesman in chief. I'm going to be the ambassador in chief for New Hampshire to recruit new businesses and to help keep them here, those that are struggling or having issues in our state. And finally, I'm going to appoint a business advocate to be a troubleshooter in state government, to cut through red tape or bureaucracy. And then we're going to work with a business advocacy group to make sure we implement changes in state government to make life easier for business to grow, flourish, and relocate here. And access to capital is part of that equation. So I will be a proactive spokesman and ambassador for New Hampshire. Maggie Hassan, Jackie Silly, no credibility on that front at all. And they don't believe it either, frankly.
Thanks, Alex. I look forward to being our state's salesman in chief, and one of the lines I've used very often is I said, I am aiming to be Governor Deval Patrick's worst nightmare. And I say that because I want him to know that I'm shamelessly going into his state and poaching jobs from the state of Massachusetts up here to New Hampshire. Why? Because New Hampshire is second in the country per capita on the amount of people that commute out of state every day to go to work. My father, who's sitting here in the front row this evening, maybe you've seen his mug on TV recently in our new ad, he's been commuting to Boston every day since 1986, since they moved up here. But we're only going to be able to do it, I'm only going to be able to be a salesman if I give them a good reason why they should come to New Hampshire. We have to become a more business-friendly environment, and we'll do that by cutting our business profits tax, reducing the business enterprise tax, cutting through regulations, becoming a right-to-work state, lowering the cost of health care and electricity rates, all these different things. You know, my philosophy is it's not state government that creates jobs, but it's state government that creates the environment and atmosphere for good jobs to be created. And I can't wait to get on the phone, call up these CEOs every week and say, hey, have you thought about doing business in New Hampshire before? Why and why not? And let me tell you about the good things that we're doing here in the state and why you should be locating your jobs in New Hampshire.
Bill, if you could ask the next question to Kevin.
Kevin, The legislature left open the issue of education funding by the state this past term. Can you just discuss what your understanding of the issue is, what its likely and possible impacts will be on the state budget and taxes, and how you would go about addressing those impacts?
Absolutely. Look, this is a crucial issue. We need an ed funding amendment in this state if we're going to target aid to the neediest communities. The formula that we're using right now is simply unsustainable. We're sending money to communities that quite frankly don't need it, and we're holding money back to those communities that do need it. And so as governor, I will work very hard to make sure we finally pass a constitutional amendment to put it on the ballot and give the voters the right to vote on this issue, to say we're going to target aid as we've always done in the state of New Hampshire. John Lynch has been governor for 8 years. He campaigned on this issue. He said when he was campaigning he would solve this by passing an ed funding amendment. And I know it because I was working for Governor Benson at the time. It's a failed promise 8 years later. Even with a Democrat majority, he couldn't pass an ed funding amendment. So I would make that a very high priority of mine. But that's where my education plan begins. It doesn't end there. We need to reform the education system too. Allow for more school choice. Allow for more charter schools. I have a plan called Money Follows the Child, which would empower parents to choose the schools for their children rather than sending the money to the local school districts. We need to reform things like tenure reform as well, and seniority, so that we can keep good teachers around even if they haven't been on the job very long. So I look very forward to working with the next legislature, be it Republican or Democrat. I certainly hope it's Republican, but working with whoever it is to make sure that we allow the people in the state the opportunity to solve this once and for all. It's time to get the courts out of meddling with education funding and put it back in the hands of the legislature.
I was wondering if you could just, talk about what Kevin just said, if you could rebuttal with his remarks.
I'm going to answer the question that was asked because it's the important question that's being asked. And you'll let the audience decide whether or not either one of us has a different view of this. I've been chairman of the State Board of Education, as I said, in the mid-'90s, a former teacher, former diocesan school board chairman overseeing the Catholic schools of our state, hence the cartoon I described. I was the defendant in the Claremont lawsuit. We won in the Superior Court. The Speaker's question is quite right. The Supreme Court is the one that's changed the Constitution by the Claremont II decision, in which I was intimately involved. We need to have a constitutional amendment because if we do not, you will see another lawsuit coming from the plaintiffs saying we're underfunding the educational adequacy. Do you understand what this Claremont II decision has done? Essentially, the court has said that when it comes to education in New Hampshire, it is a non-delegable duty. That means the state cannot transfer to cities and towns and school districts the authority to chart educational planning to provide adequate education or to provide educational funding. And what we've done is taken away the power of the local communities to have local control. We need this constitutional amendment. I'm not speaking in theory, I'm speaking from experience. And I'll have the experience to bring our legislature to a place where we can put a constitutional amendment on the ballot and write this so that we have local control and true educational reform. And I hope that responds to the question, Mr. Speaker.
Alex could be the next one for Kevin.
I got this snazzy haircut in Bedford a couple of days ago from a nice young lady in her 20s. She said that she doesn't get politics. I don't think politics gets her. I asked her, what costs you time or money in your life needlessly? Gas prices. She lives 5 minutes from work. And I don't mean to belittle her issue. I think she's speaking to the burden of soaring gas prices. If you could speak generally, Kevin, about energy costs.
Absolutely. And look, we need a long-term energy plan in our state. Much like we have a 10-year transportation plan, we need a 10-year energy policy. As I've said before, electric rates are going through the roof in this state. We've all seen them go up as ratepayers and as businesses as well. And this puts us at a competitive disadvantage when we're looking to attract businesses into the state, especially if it's a manufacturing business. IKEA was going to relocate a manufacturing plant or build a manufacturing plant in the city of Claremont. Decided not to. Why? Because of our high cost of electricity. So what I've said is a number of things. Number one is we ought to allow the public utilities to purchase electricity at the cheapest cost possible. Right now we subsidize as ratepayers a lot of these renewable energies. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have a diverse portfolio, but at the same time, these companies have to learn how to stand, on their own and not be subsidized by the ratepayers. But that's one thing we do right now through the renewable portfolio standards as a state. The other issue too is we put a lot of onerous regulations on our utilities as well, both on a state level through DES and through the EPA. The Employment Prevention Agency, as I like to call them. Recently, they wanted to put a $112 million mandate on the Merrimack station that PSNH owns. A $112 million mandate that's based on environmental data from 40 years ago. And that's all going to cost us, the ratepayers, if they're forced to do that. Now, what would I do as governor? I'd get on the phone to Washington and say, here's the deal, guys. You want to put a $112 million mandate on one of our energy stations, either you need to pay for it from Washington or go pound sand. Because I am not telling the ratepayers of this state that their electricity costs are going up yet again. And oh, by the way, next time you send us a mandate, make sure it's based on environmental data that it's at least current and recent rather than 40 years ago. So we really do need a long-term energy plan. We need to put everything on the table too. Natural gas, it's so cheap right now. We should be looking at whether or not we can build infrastructure, new infrastructure, to bring more pipeline through the state, get on the cutting edge of this, rather than looking back on it 10 years from now and saying, oh, we missed out on it. So I think we need a very long-term, comprehensive energy policy in the state, something we haven't had for a long time.
Alex, I think your question was really focused on gasoline prices. Is that what you were driving, or generally?
Yeah, two sides to energy. If you want to start gas and fit in electricity, it's all right.
Clearly, we have an issue in New Hampshire in terms of our energy costs. We've, over the years, artificially supported higher cost energy delivery. And we need a comprehensive plan, not just for our existing electric utilities and our electric energy plans, but also to remove those barriers that are driving costs in our state. How about if we start to get behind the effort to repeal RGGI? Can we start to do that? Okay. We need to look at what are the factors in the state that are driving those costs. Some of it's legislative, some of it's regulatory, and we need to have a diagnosis of our own energy platform. And then as we look to develop new energies or energy sources, whether it's windmill or alternative energy, let's make sure it's cost effective. Let's not arbitrarily subsidize in a way that distorts the marketplace. And then, of course, we need full regulation. We need to move into that area where we have true competition and that's in all aspects of the energy sector. It is important that we work with our energy companies. We need to continue to encourage competition on all fours. But in the end, it's a comprehensive approach that needs to be undertaken under the leadership of the governor who's committed to make this the most pro-business state in the country.
Bill, if you could ask Ovid a question.
Sure. Ovid, we stopped the overspending this term, and we passed a budget that had a $1.1 billion reduction. And by doing that, we were able to save a family of four $3,000 in new taxes that we didn't have to impose to cover that deficit. Now, some of us are saying that the $10.4 billion budget that we put in place could be reduced further to $10 billion, and that $10 billion is enough. Do you agree? And if you do agree, what taxes would you reduce now that we have those savings?
Bill, I thank you and your colleagues in the House and the Senate for giving us a balanced budget. You all applied the real math, the old math, not the new math, to get there. And Charlie Arlinghouse had a very good article today that talked about not just the conservative, the realistic revenue projections that the Speaker and his colleagues in both the House and the Senate were able to achieve to get us into a balanced position. I don't know whether or not we can save another $400 million from our budget, our binding budget. But what I'm going to do is begin by asking on November 7th, our department has to do zero-based budgeting. As you know, we're a maintenance budget approach. And so right now, the leadership of the executive branch of government is coming up with a maintenance budget, not zero-based budgeting. We need to get control on the spending side, and we need to make sure that what we're doing is efficient. We need to move to privatize where we can. There's no reason for us to continue to have drilling equipment in the Department of Transportation when private companies can do that. There's no reason to have land surveyors in the Department of Transportation. So there are a lot of opportunity costs that we can save in state government if we work from day one, which I will do, to craft a budget that we can propose to the legislature that brings us to as low spending as possible. Maybe we can save more than $400 million over that 2 years. But we don't know the answer to that because we haven't participated in that kind of a budget approach, and I'll do that. And then to the extent we can save monies, I want to work on lowering our business profits tax, business enterprise tax, because that's the area that we need to focus on. I have an easy plan for tax reform that cuts across the spectrum of business taxation, not just the rates, but also what are the drivers for making it difficult for our businesses to succeed and simplify to pay their taxes. So we need a comprehensive approach there. That's where I would focus my energies if we can lower spending by state government.
Kevin, if there's anything that Ovid said that you would like to remark before you answer.
Do I get to remark first and then?
Yes, then you can answer the question.
Okay.
You know,
Well,
just to,
there are two quick things I would say, and one is that I have to respectfully disagree on his approach to zero-based budgeting in state government, because having put together a budget in state government, I can tell you it's very difficult. It's not structurally set up to be able to do zero-based budgeting. In fact, the last governor to say he was going to do zero-based budgeting, guess who? John Lynch, back in 2004, and then he realized once he got in there, you can't exactly do that. One of the things I would do is tell my commissioners they're going to come in with their budgets at 97% of what the previous biennium was, because government should be getting more efficient as it goes along. The other thing I would just take issue with is Ovid's approach to cutting the BPT and the BET. Ovid, in his, it actually isn't as easy as it sounds. It complicates the tax code in New Hampshire more because it picks winners and losers. It says if you're a manufacturing company, you might be able to get a credit on the BET. Also does it for companies that hire students with student loans and pay off some of those loans. I've called for cuts across the board for every company. Not picking winners and losers, but saying the business profits tax down to 5%, the business enterprise tax down to 0.25%, no matter what company you are. So those are two areas where I would respectfully disagree with Ovid. But if I can comment on how I would approach, the state budget in terms of whether or not it needs to be cut further. We can always find more efficiencies in state government. And one of the things that Governor Benson did in a study that I would take off the shelves and blow the dust off of was the Governor's Commission on Finding Efficiencies in State Government that was done in 2003. It was a bipartisan commission, came up with great ideas on how to make state government more efficient, and almost none of the things that were in this report, and it's a thick report, were ever implemented. Things like consolidating certain state agencies like banking, securities, and insurance, making it into one financial services agency. It found you could save $74 million over 1 year alone, and $420 million over 5 years. And so I'd work with the legislature to implement these efficiencies on a state government level. And as I said before, I'd work with the commissioners to bring in budgets at 97%. And the last part is doing what I did in state government, coming up with a system of metrics to measure the efficacy of programs. And those programs that aren't working well, that are inefficient, that aren't serving the population they say they are, they either need to be completely reformed or eliminated altogether. But we can make targeted good budget cuts that way by putting a system of metrics into place in state government.
If you'd like to respond.
Well, the only thing I would say is I'd ask the members of the audience here to compare our websites, compare the plans. My website's open2012.com. And you'll see that our plan is reasonable, it's proportional, it's funded over 2 years. The term of office for the governor and the budget is 2 years. And so you just need to compare on the merits, and I'd invite you to do that. Thank you.
Kevin, would you like to?
Well, I would just say, I've said all along, we need to think long term. The problem is we've been managing budget to budget for too long. We need to have a long-term plan. And that's why I have a phase down over 7 years by the year 2020. And I would invite you to compare the plans on our websites. And I think you'll see mine is, in fact, a lot easier because it just cuts the rates for all companies rather than going to this winners and losers approach by picking certain sectors. And the other thing, I lower the business profits tax in my plan again to 5% over 7 years. Ovid's only goes down from 8.5% to 8% over 2 years. I don't think that's going to stimulate the economy enough and make it attractive for businesses to want to move into our state.
Alex, if you would ask the next question for Ovid.
I know it's still the primary, but Why can you work with Democrats any better than a Democratic governor would be able to work with Republicans? Where's the idea to work in spite of government-growing agendas wherever possible?
Well, I think it's absolutely imperative that the governor of New Hampshire work with everyone in New Hampshire. This is not a time that we can pick who we're going to work with, either by party affiliation or by location in the state. This is a time where we need to bring people together. And in my experience in business, my experience in the not-for-profit sector, and frankly my experience in government, has shown that I can work with people who don't necessarily agree with me. I take Ronald Reagan's view. If you agree with me 80% of the time, you're not my 20% enemy. And we need to bring people to the table and not use the party label as a barrier to access to the conference room table or as a speed pass to getting higher access or efficient access. We need to be, the governor needs to be the governor for all the people. And I'll be able to work with Democrats and independents, libertarians, and vegetarians. It won't matter to me. If you have a solution or a problem, if you think you can help New Hampshire move in the right direction, which is to prosperity, and work with me then, and I'll work with you. And that's a message we have to send, my friends. The Republican nominee for governor has to appeal to independents. Don't forget, Republicans, we are a minority. The plurality of voters self-identify as not registered. I have a coalition of supporters already that are independents as well as Democrats, and they're waiting for the primary to be over. And I'm happy with the kind of broad-based support we've had. And I hope people in New Hampshire will look at the way we conduct ourselves in these campaigns from both sides of the aisles and draw a conclusion as to who can they work with, who will sit down with them. And the legislature organizes itself around party label, and that's okay. The majority selects the president, the Senate, or the Speaker of the House. The governor is not a partisan position, and I'll be the people's governor, given the opportunity to serve. And there will be room at the table for all comers who have a solution for New Hampshire's problems.
Alex, as governor of the state, you do need to be able to reach across the aisle. And regardless of which party is in charge, they'll all have a seat, certainly at my office, whether they're in the minority or the majority, because to me, in order to get the people's work done and move the state forward, you do need to be able to work with both parties. And I'm also proud of the broad coalition that we've built of independents and some Democrats too. In fact, I see one of them named Jerry Galetian here tonight. And Jerry, I'm not going to make you wave your hand because I don't want you to get tackled by the room that's in. But I also have a record. You know, when I was the assistant director of our state's juvenile justice system, for 2 of the 4 years, it was under a Democratic legislature. And I had to work with that legislature to advance some of the stuff that we were looking to do within the juvenile justice system. So I had to work with Democrats in the legislature. But you know, I will take issue with one thing that Ovid has said repeatedly on the campaign trail, and that is that he's going to check his Republican label at the door. I'm proud of my Republican label, and I'm proud of it because it stands for... It stands for personal responsibility, it stands for limited government, free enterprise, low taxation, low spending, all those things we believe in. So even though I'll reach across the aisle to work with the Democrats, I'm not going to check my party label at the door just because I'm now in an elected position. I'm going to carry those tenets and principles into the governor's office with me, and we'll govern off of those principles as well.
I'd like to take a minute, again, just to thank all of our sponsors, and I'll do it real quick. Again, I cannot put this debate on without them. Top of the Town Toastmasters, Richard Poisson, Tom DuBois for Executive Counselor, Rick Parent for District 1 for Congressional, Frank Zabel for Hillsborough County Sheriff, www.pegondemand.tv, the Coin and Stamp Shop, Phil Grazzo for New Hampshire Senate, Granite State Institute of Politics, and of course Drew from the New Hampshire NRA, and our beautiful flowers from Jacques Flowers. And if you notice that you do have a little pamphlet that I put on everybody's seat, again, you know, donations would be appreciative if somebody wants to help out with these events. The address is on the back and how to make the check out, etc. Thank you. I'd like to ask the next question. I'd like to start with Kevin. Kevin, this is about EBT cards. Okay. I know where we're going with this. I'm all for helping the truly needy, and I mean the truly needy. I don't have any problem. Yet this poor 65-year-old grandmother in Peterborough, I believe where it was fired a few weeks ago for refusing to sell a person using an EBT card to buy cigarettes. Do you feel she was justified in refusing him, and is there a problem that you would look at as our next governor of New Hampshire?
Absolutely, 100% she was right in what she did. And I'm not just saying that because Jackie Whiten of Antrim has endorsed my campaign. But I'm saying it because, to me, I commend her. She's a hero for finally standing up to the taxpayers and saying, this is wrong. Even if legally right now it's okay to do it, ethically it's wrong that people are trying to purchase alcohol, cigarettes, lottery tickets, whatever, with their EBT card. And quite frankly, she shed a lot of light on this entire problem. For instance, I was unaware that it could be used as an ATM card, and that you could take out unlimited sums of money depending on how much is on the card. I mean, that's just opening it up right for abuse. Now, you have to know as a governor what you can do to put more restrictions on the usage of EBT cards, which is something I would definitely do. One thing is that a lot of the rules, because a lot of this is federal money, the rules are governed out of Washington. You know, is it shocking to know that because it's being done out of Washington, it's not working right? I would direct my Commissioner of Health and Human Services to apply for a waiver from Washington, as other states have already done, so that we can put on our own rules and restrictions here in the state on as far as what can be purchased on these EBT cards and how they can be used. The other thing I would do is that we put an RFP out to get a vendor every few years that does all the administration of these EBT cards. Right now it's JP Morgan. And we do this as a conglomerate, and one of the states that does it with us is New York, and we've let New York take the lead on the RFPs over the years. So what I would do is I would say we should do our own independent RFP and make sure that as part of that RFP we're telling the vendors you must have a tracking system on the usage of the EBT card so that we can track how these purchases are being done, where they're being done, and so that we can better monitor it as a state. Because you know what? There are people who do need these services. And there are people who are losing out on getting these services because of folks that are purchasing the wrong things on them. And so that's where we as a state are saying, yeah, we're sticking up for our poor, our most vulnerable, our needy, but we want to make sure the right people are getting these services and they're not being abused. And again, I commend Jackie Whiten for doing what she did on it.
It's not just this incident. We have to look top and bottom over our social service delivery system to make sure that we have qualified people who are eligible for these services. I stood with the speaker at a press conference earlier this year in support of legislation that would require us to validate that beneficiaries of these benefits actually are New Hampshire citizens, that they're alive. The speaker pointed out through an audit that was done at his request that there were a number of issues with respect to verifying, first of all, the beneficiaries, that they're eligible to receive those benefits. And again, as a foster parent of a special needs young man who receives benefits through the state in some of these programs, he's truly needy, and any dollars that we lose hurt him, and they hurt, that loss of dollars hurt other people who are truly needy in our state. With respect to the cashier who stood up and did the right thing, I don't know what her employment relationship is with her employer, but I think we owe her a debt of gratitude for shedding light on something that's really a problem. As a candidate for governor, I've been talking about fighting the federal government on all fours. People have criticized me when running for governor over it. Do you understand? I'm running for governor in part to protect New Hampshire's sovereignty, to advance New Hampshire's sovereignty, and this should not be allowed to happen because some federal regulator tells us we have to let these people buy things that are not truly needy from our definition. So let's get on with the business of making sure we are protecting New Hampshire first.
Bill, you could ask the next question to Kevin.
Kevin, one of of the least understood aspects of Obamacare is how it seeks to hijack state finances in order to expand insurance coverage, particularly in the area of Medicaid. And one of the areas that attempted to do it is by doubling income eligibility. That's the aspect that the recent Supreme Court decision said is optional to the states. Could you tell us whether or not New Hampshire should take up that option and expand its population? As part of your answer, could you tell us where you think Medicaid is going in New Hampshire and how New Hampshire is going to finally be able to protect itself and its sovereignty from the federal government trying to push its overspending down onto New Hampshire?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm against the Medicaid expansion as part of Obamacare. And you know, the legislature just recently passed managed Medicaid in our state. And so we're finally going to be able to put a system in place where we can manage our Medicaid dollars better, make it a better service delivery system, and make it more cost efficient as well. Expanding the Medicaid under Obamacare would simply blow the whole thing up. And I am telling you that this, if we were forced to expand Medicaid in our state, this would break the bank of our entire state. And it's amazing to me that the federal government has dangled the carrot by saying, well, we're going to pay for 100% of it the first 3 years and only ratchet it down to 90% by the year 2020. This coming from the same government that's racked up a $15 trillion debt. And the same government that told us back in 1975 when they passed IDEA that they were going to pay for 40% of special ed funding. Do you know what the government share of special ed funding has been over the last 30 years? 17%. Nowhere even close. So if anybody thinks for a minute that they're going to actually pay 100% of the expanded Medicaid costs in the state, I've got a tropical island off the Isle of Shoals to sell you. I mean, you have to be completely gullible to enter into that kind of deal. So absolutely not. I would opt New Hampshire out of the Medicaid expansion. You know, the state of New Hampshire has enjoyed a good state-federal partnership over the years on Medicaid. We've got to continue to be able to do that and allow our managed Medicaid system to be implemented, to go forward, and manage it here from a state level. The other thing, too, is that I'd be all in favor of having the federal government blockade those Medicaid monies that we're currently getting to the state, because again, I believe as a state we can much better manage our funds than have it being done by some bureaucrat down in Washington.
Ronald Reagan often reminded people that conservatism is not an ideology. Conservatism is about experience. It's what life experience teaches us about how things should be and how they work best. It's that experience that I answer this question that the speaker has posed. I've practiced law in the last 14 years, focusing primarily on health care. I don't speak to this issue in theory. I speak to this issue because I know it and work with it. I will tell you right now that I've already taken the position that New Hampshire should not participate in this hijacking of Medicaid by the federal government on Obamacare. What we should be doing, things, specific things I've already talked about. We should be seeking a maintenance of effort requirement, a waiver from that requirement under existing Medicaid. And then we should be demanding that the federal government block grant the delta that they would propose to pay us for participating in the expanded Medicaid program and designing our own New Hampshire solution to providing coverage for more lives, premium support, and then changing our healthcare delivery system so we have a risk-based approach to healthcare. I speak to you from experience. I'm the only candidate for governor who has this experience. And finally, when it comes up to standing up to the federal government, I am the only candidate who led a department, an agency of this state, that said no to federal dollars when I led the fight against Goals 2000 in the mid-90s. And some of you will remember it was very much like this. The federal government offered us a little bit of carrot, a few dollars, and said, let us get more control over your schools. And our state, under my leadership, was the only state to say no. And I bear the scars for that, and I'll take those scars with me to fight for you and this state under this issue. We should not participate in this.
Alex, if you could ask Ovid the next question.
It's the baseball all-star break, so here's a softball. Jackie has received a string of government worker and labor union endorsements and vowed to bring about a very different state than the one we have today. A candidate named Bill Kennedy is running on implementing a 4% state income tax. How will you keep Maggie Hassan from sneaking through as a moderator?
So you're assuming that she's going to be the nominee for the Democratic Party, or you mean between now and your primary?
I'm saying somehow there are two candidates who have managed to find a way to run to her left.
She's right with them. She is right with them. And we have to remind the voters of New Hampshire that we've had a candidate before who took the pledge against broad-based taxes. And she honored that pledge in her first term, and she honored that pledge in her second term, and in her third term she supported a sales tax for New Hampshire. That candidate was the moderate Jean Shaheen. Jean Shaheen is no moderate, and I can speak from experience again about that. She was not credible then. Maggie Hassan is not credible now. Maggie Hassan has as liberal a record as Jackie Silly does. Maggie Hassan, thank you. She has as liberal a record as Jackie does, and she has supported an income tax in the past. Someone should be asking Maggie Hassan, what was your conversion moment? When did you decide you were against a broad-based tax? When did you become a pro-business moderate? And get an answer to that question. She is exactly where they are, Alex. And it's up to us, as citizens of New Hampshire and as candidates, to remind the voters exactly where the Democratic Party and their candidates would take this state in a fundamentally different direction. I present the starkest contrast in a general election, and the voters will have a clear choice. And the choice they're going to choose is the choice that leads to prosperity and the prosperity agenda that we're advocating. And we need your help to get there.
Yeah, I agree with Tova that Maggie Hassan, or Hassan, however you want to say her name, she is as left with the other two candidates. She just is trying to mask it, but we'll make sure we do a good job of not allowing her to do that. You know, the other thing here is that I didn't mention on that Medicaid question is, first of all, Maggie Hassan has said she supported an income tax in the past. And by the way, she doesn't support the constitutional amendment to ban an income tax, which is all you need to know about her. But as far as this Medicaid goes, they want the Medicaid expansion to happen. And this will undoubtedly be used for them to try to back New Hampshire into a broad-based sales or income tax. That's the only way they could actually try to pay for it. So they should also be asked a question, you support the Medicaid expansion, how do you plan on paying for it? Jackie Silly's transparent. She says, I support the broad-based tax. Maggie Hassan, she supports it, but she's not saying it. Lastly, I will tell you this. You know, I fought Maggie Hassan and Jackie Silly both, tooth and nail, during their term in the state Senate while I was the director of Cornerstone. I was there in the front lines fighting things like the LLC tax, fighting things like the tax on lottery winnings, fighting things like the tax on electricity rates. All these 84 taxes and fees. I was there every day in the New Hampshire Senate fighting them tooth and nail successfully against a lot of these tax policies they were trying to put forward. And I make no doubt if I am your nominee, I will take every moment I can to remind the voters of every tax hiking, job killing, business busting, nanny stating, Debbie Downer policy these two ever voted.
Bill, if you could ask the next question to Kevin.
Kevin, would you work for a full repeal of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative cap and tax regime? And are there any other regulations or regulatory structures that you'd try to pull down in your first term of government?
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Speaker. I would support a full repeal of RGGI. It's another onerous environmental regulation that's only served to drive up rates in the state of New Hampshire. So we need to get out of it quickly. I know you folks in the House tried doing that in this last session, and it got ratcheted down, so now that if a couple of states get out of it in the region, then New Hampshire can pull out of it. We need to fully repeal RGGI to get rid of this onerous environmental regulation, because it's another thing that is hiking rates here in the state of New Hampshire. But in terms of regulations, we put so many regulations on small business in the state. I hear from small business owners all the time that talk to me about all of these stringent regulations that they have to go through just to be a business owner in the state. I'll give you a perfect example. I was up visiting a barber, okay, a couple of weeks ago in Laconia. Jack the Clipper. All right. Great guy. He's been a barber for over 42 years, okay? He has worked under barbers. He's always done barbering, opened his own place up. He's been named recently Barber of the Year in Laconia. The state threatened to close him down because he has a stylist license. And he's not technically a barber, but he's a stylist, and they won't allow him to advertise as a barber until he pays more money to the state to get that official title. Honest to God, you visit his place, he's got the barber pole out there and his sign, he's got duct tape around the barber pole, and he's got duct tape over where it says barber, and it just says Jack the Clipper, stylist. Do you know how many people think they're actually going to a barber? To the point where Laconia named him Barber of the Year? It's completely stupid. That's all I can say. And it's these kind of regulations that are killing small business owners in our state because he doesn't want to pay the money to do it. And by the way, they said, if you get a barber to work in your shop, well then you can, put on the sign barber again. He finally did that. His wife, she became a master barber even though she was a cosmetologist already. You can't make this stuff up, okay? And the state still said you can't take the duct tape off the sign on the barber pole until we send you an official letter. The regulations like this end under my administration.
I think the question was repealing RGGI. The answer is yes. And Jack the Clipper is Jack Acaris, brother of Joe Acaris of Manchester. Wonderful family. I'm glad to call him a supporter, and I'll work with him too.
Alex, if you could ask the next question to Kevin.
Yeah, I have to remind Kevin, this is a Republican gubernatorial debate, so Haley Barber is the Barber of the Year every year. I was doing some light summer reading yesterday, the New Hampshire Constitution. I learned, among other things, that if you win, your title will be His Excellency. What more serious part of the New Hampshire Constitution or any other New Hampshire law is unenforced or overlooked?
Is that question to me
Yes.
first, Alex? Is unenforced or overlooked? Well, I mean, certainly, you have Article 7, which deals with state sovereignty. And as Ovid talked about, we really do need to, as a state, push back on the federal government more. I think we've allowed the federal government to encroach too much into the state's dealings and the state's business. One of the things that I saw at Health and Human Services is that, again, talk about the dangling carrot. We always, we're taking federal money in and almost became addicted to this federal money. And I used to ask, how much is being spent in state and local resources just to comply with all of these federal mandates so we can get that money? And nobody knew the answer to it. So one of the things I would do as governor is I would talk to all my commissioners and say, any agency that's currently receiving state funds, I want a cost-benefit analysis between how much federal money we're actually taking in versus how much money we're using in compliance. And I bet you in some areas we could probably get off of that federal money because as a state we are paying more and just complying with those particular mandates. So that's certainly an area we have to stop the federal encroachment on the state level. And I do just need to add too, I'm also proud to call Jack the Clipper a supporter, and his sign, my sign, Smith for Governor, is actually on his property.
These little books. This is the Constitution of New Hampshire. And the governor of New Hampshire is sworn to uphold the Constitution of New Hampshire and the Constitution of the United States. So it's important for whoever's running for governor to understand what this Constitution provides. The Constitution is a limiting document, not a living document, and we have to make sure that we follow the prescripts that is the contract or the compact between the people and their government as expressed in this Constitution. And we've amended the Constitution over the years. We've amended it, for example, to bar unfunded mandates. I don't think we've been doing a good job of that, frankly. We have, if you talk to city officials around our state, we have been driving down costs to municipalities in ways that may not be directly known at first. We need to enforce the unfunded mandate provision of this Constitution. We need to enforce the Part 1 of the Constitution, which is really a statement of the Bill of Rights for New Hampshire citizens. It's a reflection of what our founding fathers believed were fundamentally our rights. And this is an even better statement on the right to bear arms, on the right to personal freedom and liberty. And we need to make sure we follow this Constitution in that regard as well. So as the governor of the state of New Hampshire, I will commend to you that I will know this Constitution, I will live by it, and I will enforce it. And that will be my pledge to you, as it should be for anyone who's taken the oath of office.
Well, staying on with time, the debate's an hour and a half long, and it's almost done. I can't believe how quick it's gone by. Bill, if you could ask Ovid the next question and basically the final question.
Sure, thanks. Ovid, as governor, what will you do so that the veterans finally get a full-service VA hospital in New Hampshire?
Well, first of all, I want to thank all the veterans who are in this room for their service in this country. Would you all stand up? Time in our state and our nation's history, and let us not let their sacrifices and the other men and women who served us and have given the ultimate sacrifice, not let their efforts have been expended in vain. We are at the brink in our country and in our state. And so this is why it's so encouraging to see so many people here to commend these veterans for the sacrifices they made. As far as I'm concerned, Mr. Speaker, we're going to work with the federal government, which is a federal, Veterans Hospital is a federal hospital, and to try to expand benefits and make sure that our veterans have access to local hospitals as well in the interim through vouchers and so forth, so they have ready access to health care, the best health care possible, working in partnership with the federal government. But I will say this, if I'm the governor of New Hampshire, we're not going to turn over control over our health care delivery system in exchange for a veterans hospital. We're going to make sure that New Hampshire continues to offer the best quality possible to our citizens and our veterans, and we're going to work in partnership with the federal government through its Veterans Administration and come up with the best plan. But we're not going to simply turn over the keys to our delivery system because Washington decides that it has a better idea. And that's my commitment to the veterans in this room and the veterans across New Hampshire. Thank you.
I would echo Ovid's sentiments and just say that I commend all the veterans in this room for your service to the state and to our country as well. I come from a family of veterans, 2 grandfathers that served in the Navy. My father was in the Air Force Reserves. And to me as a state, if we're not treating our veterans well, then how can we possibly be expected to treat anyone else well in our state? They deserve the utmost respect and treatment from a state perspective. Now, in terms of getting a full-service VA hospital here, the one in Manchester is, as many of you probably know, is inadequate right now. It is not a full-service hospital. And so I, too, would work with our congressional delegation. This is a nonpartisan issue. It should be a nonpartisan issue when we're talking about our veterans. And I would work with them to work with the federal government to try to get a full-service hospital here. If we're not able to do that, what we should at least do is allow veterans to access hospitals in their geographic area and get vouchers from the federal government that they can use to go and access those hospitals. Because one of the biggest problems right now is access to transportation for a lot of veterans. They need to either go to White River Junction in Vermont or Jamaica Plain down in Massachusetts. And so one way to get rid of the transportation problem is allow them to access hospitals all throughout the state. Lastly, I would just say this. I'm alarmed by the number of veterans that are returning home right now from the battlefield that are committing suicide. We need to make sure there's adequate services for mental health services, adequate care there for our veterans who need to access it.
Well, I want to thank the candidates candidates for coming, and Ovid, if you would tell us why you should be our next governor.
Thank you, John. And again, thank you, John, and the Granite State Institute of Politics, and in a special way, Phyllis Burt. Putting up with John, Phyllis. You know, it takes a great partner to do the kind of work that John's been doing. And Mr. Speaker, thank you, Alex, for being the panelists here this evening. And again, thank you all for coming and participating. Now, this is a conversation we're going to continue to have here in New Hampshire, going into the primary and into the general election. And this election is critical. It's not just critical at the national level, it is critical here in New Hampshire. We've only had a Republican governor 2 out of the last 16 years, 14 years of Democratic control. And we've seen spending get out of control. We've seen regulations grow. We haven't seen the kind of discipline that we're used to here in New Hampshire. I believe New Hampshire is the most exceptional state in the country if we're given the opportunity to chart a future for our children and our grandchildren that relies on local communities, local control, prosperity, because we're the best place to do business, the best place to live, to raise a family, and the very best place to live free or die, which is our motto. That needs to be our cause. And New Hampshire exceptionalism is going to be expressed in a number of ways. And what we need for a governor is someone who believes and acts on the conservative agenda and principles of our party, someone who's been a leader and is proven and tested, someone who stood on those principles and been there with you and will be there with you through the tough times ahead. I'm pleased to have the support of my wife and my family and the support of many of you here. But there's a lot more work to be done, because this is not just about winning a primary. This is about winning the general election, and it's not about holding office, it's about making a difference. Ovid2012.com is our website. I invite you to join our team. I ask for your vote, and together we can create that New Hampshire exceptionalism that's worthy of our children and grandchildren. God bless you, God bless America, and God bless the great state of New Hampshire. Thank you.
And Ovid for the conversation, and thank you to all of you again for being a great audience this evening. You know, this election, it is about the future, and there's a tremendous opportunity at stake here. And it's an opportunity to make New Hampshire, as I said, into the most economically competitive state in the country. There's no reason why we can't lead the nation in job creation and in economic development as well. But there's no reason why we can't lead globally. And the kind of students, the best and brightest students we're outputting through an innovative, robust, and competitive educational system. You know, New Hampshire has been lagging behind too far in these areas for the last 8 years. And the question is, are we going to continue business as usual, continue the status quo? We simply cannot do that. And that's why I've offered a bold new vision for our state, and I'm offering fresh leadership that's grounded on conservative principles. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm running to be your next governor because I have the ideas, the vision, the energy, the passion, and the experience to lead us into a new era of prosperity. I will use my experience as a former state legislator, as someone who worked in the executive branch under a former governor, as someone who has run a state agency, but also someone who has fought successfully for good conservative policy in the private sector as well. I will not check my party label at the door. I'm running as a Republican. I plan on winning as a Republican, and I will serve on Republican principles and values. Together, you and I, we're going to make New Hampshire the envy of the rest of the country. Thank you all very much. God bless you, and have a great evening.